Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Some news came out earlier today that really sucks for Denver Nuggets fans, NBA fans in general. Michael Porter Jr. is out for the season. He has a back problem and it's dealing with his nerves. He's got to get surgery and he's going to be out for the entire rest of the season. Another big blow to a Denver Nuggets team that's already dealing with a couple significant injuries coming into the season. And it's an injury that really kind of starts to bring their title window into question. If you don't know what a title window is, it's basically people's kind of perceived range that teams have to win an NBA title. And the Denver Nuggets might have missed theirs. We'll talk about all that in a second, but first let's go back a couple years to where the Denver Nuggets made the Western Conference Finals. Back in the bubble, the Denver Nuggets, coming back from 2-3-1 deficits, end up making it to the Western Conference Finals before they fell to the eventual NBA champion Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, it was a tough team to beat, especially for a very young roster. And coming out of that Western Conference Finals, me and many other people saw the Nuggets as a team that is going to win a championship at some point. Going into last season, I thought they could very well be a team that could come out and win the championship. I thought the Lakers were probably the favorites, alongside the Brooklyn Nets out east, and then the Denver Nuggets were right there in that secondary tier with Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., who looked like he was going to kind of ramp up and just get better. He looked like he was really turning into the player that people saw him before the draft, before his back issues kind of got called into question, the ones that are now affecting him at this point, the reason why he fell in that draft, if you didn't know. The team looked like they were really leveling up. And then they brought in Aaron Gordon at the trade deadline. And when they got Aaron Gordon for the short period of time where they had Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Nikola Jokic, they looked really, really unstoppable. They looked like a team that could beat anyone in the Western Conference, Eastern Conference, whoever they came up against. They look like world beaters. And if they had went into the Western Conference playoffs with that roster fully healthy, I would have picked the Denver Nuggets probably to win the Western Conference. I've went on record saying that before. And even after the last season where Jamal Murray ends up tearing his ACL, he misses the NBA playoffs, I've been on record saying that I think the Denver Nuggets can win a title in the next few years. I think that they will. With this roster, just so much young talent with Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, of course, being an MVP, being one of the best players in the league. A lot of people say he is the best player, and if you're someone who thinks that, I think that's a very valid opinion with the way that he affects the game on both sides of the ball at this point. He's playing solid defense so far this season, but really just an offensive dynamo. He can do basically everything. Aaron Gordon looked like a perfect fit next to Nikola Jokic in the time that they've played together. And of course, you've got Jamal Murray who's going to come back at some point. And even if he's not quite the player that he once was, maybe he kind of plateaus after that injury. At least now you have Michael Porter Jr. getting better. You have Nikola Jokic. Things looked really on the up and up for the Denver Nuggets, even coming into this season. A lot of people, me included, in last offseason, I thought the Nuggets might still have a chance to win the championship this year because Jamal Murray seems like he could be back around the time the playoffs roll around. And if he gets a couple weeks in the regular season and he really starts to click quickly and his rehab, which already seems like it's on an advanced pace, he could come back even earlier than that. And eventually you've got Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. with a full other season to develop after getting a max contract extension this past offseason. You've got Nikola Jokic, you've got Aaron Gordon, you've got Will Barton back and healthy, playing good basketball. And so it looked like if Jamal Murray came back at the end of the year, the Nuggets might still have a chance to try and win a championship, assuming Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., and those other guys could keep them afloat long enough to make it to a top seed and be a threat going into the Western Conference playoffs. And now, Michael Porter Jr., those back issues, the reason why he fell in the draft, are hitting him. To start the season, he looked really poor. He looked really off. There was that video that went around right before he actually went out with this back issue where he missed that layup and he kind of seemed to be hobbling a little bit. Apparently, those back issues are back. He's got some nerve issues. He needs surgery. He's going to be out all of the season. And now all of a sudden, the Nuggets injuries are starting to really stack up. You've got Jamal Murray out with an ACL, back issues, which between the ACL and back issues, those are huge injuries. Those don't really just go away ever fully. You've got PJ Dozier, who's another young piece who has an ACL injury, amongst other guys who have missed time here and there. Nikola Jokic has missed time with a wrist injury. That's nothing significant, but it is something that's currently affecting him at the moment. And when you look back at it, now that the Nuggets are dealing with these two major injuries, you look at their contract situation as well. Jamal Murray is making $38 million until 2025. You've got Nikola Jokic, who his contract is up after next season. He's going to ask for a max contract extension. I'm positive the Denver Nuggets are going to give it to him. He's going to be making upwards of $50 million or so a year once the cap spike hits again. You've got Will Barton, who's under contract at the moment for $16 million, but he's off the book next year. But then you also have Michael Porter Jr., who now has these back issues that a lot of people thought were super concerning going into the draft, concerning enough for a guy that a lot of people thought was a top 3, top 5 talent going into the draft cycle to fall all the way to the Nuggets at the end of the lottery. These issues that were significant enough to cause that are back. And now he has to miss a whole season because of them. It's scary. They just gave him $170+ million, even up to $200 million, assuming there are, like, if he makes All NBA or something like that, there's different stipulations in it. But that's a lot of money. You've got $40 million wrapped up in Jamal Murray, around $50 million Nikola Jokic, and by the end of Michael Porter Jr.'s contract, he'll be making around $40 million as well, and making between $30 and $38 million over that span. That is a lot of money. Those are your 3 guys. It is really hard to build a team. And when you throw in Aaron Gordon's $21 million, there's not much team building they can do beyond those guys. They can bring in solid role players. And of course, the dream is those 4 will be good enough alongside solid role players to bring you to a championship. That's always been the goal for this Nuggets team. They've never really needed to bring in another star because the hope is that these homegrown talents and MVP, a guy that a lot of people thought would be a most improved player candidate coming into the season and had one of the most efficient finishes to last season. A guy in Jamal Murray who had a historic playoff run. The thought, and Aaron Gordon, who looked like he fit perfectly next to those guys, those 4 guys can win you a championship. I've gone on record saying I think the Nuggets are going to win a championship. But now, you have a big back injury. You've got Jamal Murray with an ACL injury, and those are 2 of your top 4 guys, 2 of your top 3 guys that now have significant injuries. And of course, they're still young. Like, even if they come back as little worse versions of themselves, they're young, they're going to keep getting better. They'll be fine. But if those injuries are anything significant, their title window might have already closed. I don't think it has. I think that Jokic is good enough that you can put pretty much any solid supporting talent around him and you are a team that can try and compete for a championship. I think that Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are going to be fine when they come back from injuries, or at least I'm crossing my fingers that they are, because I want to see this team succeed. I like this roster. I like this team. But there is always that question mark. What if the bubble was their best chance? What if they made the Western Conference Finals, and can they get back there now? What if last season was their big chance? The Lakers dealing with a lot of injuries. You had the Utah Jazz that lost Mike Conley, and Donovan Mitchell was kind of hobbled in last year's playoffs. You had the Los Angeles Clippers who lost Kawhi Leonard during the playoffs. Was that their chance to win the West? If Jamal Murray doesn't hurt himself, the Nuggets might have very well come out of that Western Conference. Was that their shot? It might have been. What if this season was their chance? Jamal Murray comes back at the end of the year. Michael Porter Jr. builds on his most improved player candidacy. He becomes the most improved player. Alongside Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, they get a top seed in the West, bring back Jamal Murray, and they go on to win a championship. What if that was the case? But instead, these injuries have really derailed them. And it's quickly changed from a team that I was 100% sure. I felt very confident in saying that I saw the Denver Nuggets winning a championship within the next few years. I was very confident in that. I've always been a very vocal supporter of this Nuggets roster, what they've been doing, and the way that they've been building a team. They secured their young talent. They're not letting anyone go, and they've got them right now where they're young, they're clicking, and after they made that Western Conference Finals run, they got better with Aaron Gordon. They've got the pieces they need to win a championship. They just can't seem to stay on the court. And it's worrying because if these injuries are long-lasting, and these become bad contracts, it's going to be really hard to build a team around Nikola Jokic. You don't want to lose Jokic, who doesn't feel like he can win in Denver anymore. You don't want these 2 guys you have a ton of money, over $300 million wrapped up in these 2 guys in their contracts. You don't want to see them become untradeable contracts or bad contracts, or just not reach the levels that maybe they would have reached beforehand, letting you win a championship. It's always a possibility. And that's kind of what's scary about being an NBA fan or a sports fan in general, is that even when things feel like they're 100% certain, they never are. We can look at the Brooklyn Nets over there with Kyrie Irving not playing, James Harden looking like he's declined at his age 32 season. Even with Kevin Durant playing like one of the best players in the world, you could say the best, they look not fragile, but they look very vulnerable, despite last season having Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. They lost Kyrie Irving to injury. James Harden was playing on a bad hamstring. And as someone who recently had a hamstring injury, I know how much that hobbles you. It's a lot. It's tough. And so the Denver Nuggets title window feels like it's kind of in trouble. Of course, this is all 100% hypothetical. There is a good chance that Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. come back next season. This season, it's a wash. They're not going to win the title this season unless somehow Jamal Murray comes back at the end of the year. Like I said, his rehab kind of seems to be like it's on a fast track. Maybe it's faster than we think. He comes back. Him and Nikola Jokic, they click with Aaron Gordon, and they end up leading this team to a championship. There's always a possibility. With how good Jokic is with that crazy run that Jamal Murray had, only at age 23, I believe, there is always a possibility that that is what happens. But it feels like this season's a wash. And so now you go into next season, where, assuming you give Nikola Jokic a contract extension, you're completely locked in with the money on your books. You really can't make any big improvements other than maybe trading like Will Barton's contract and a first-round pick to try and get something, or Monte Morris's $9 million, or maybe like JaMychal Green's $8.7 million. Maybe you combine a couple of those and some picks, maybe like a Bull or something to try and make something happen. But who knows? So we'll see. The Nuggets title window is something that I felt very confident about being very, very open for the next few seasons. Feels like all of a sudden it's gotten a lot tighter. And there's always the chance that they already might have missed it and we didn't even know it. So those are my thoughts on the Denver Nuggets. I just want to talk about it for a little bit. I still am hopeful that these guys will come back healthy. I feel like they did miss their best chance to win a title, at least as far as I can see, last season with Jamal Murray's injury, because like I said, they were really dominating teams when Jamal Murray was healthy. But even if they missed their best chance, they still have some good chances. They're a great team. They've got the MVP. They've got these young guys that I do believe can fight back from injuries. It's just interesting to think about how quickly things can change in the NBA. So I appreciate y'all watching. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let's try and hit maybe like 100 likes on this video. I will see you all later. Real one, say it back.